Morning, everybody. Today's chapter 10, lesson 4, and it's about using those time intervals that we talked about yesterday. So our story problem today begins with Javier begins working on his oceans project at 1:30 p.m. He spends 42 minutes painting a model of Earth and labeling the oceans. At what time does Javier finish working on his project? So we have to circle the information that you need. So we need the time 1:30 p.m. that he begins working on his project and the fact that he spent 42 minutes on the project. All right, and then what time are we trying to find? We're trying to find the time that Javier finishes. The time that Javier finishes. All right, one way that we can do this is to use a number line to find the ending time. So step 1 is to find the time in the number line when Javier started working on the project, and that's at 1:30 p.m., which they've already labeled for us. Step 2 is to count forward on the number line to add the elapsed time and draw and label the jumps to show the minutes. I can break 42 minutes into shorter amounts of time. So since 1:30, and I know that if I go 30 minutes, it's going to bring me to 2 o'clock. That's what I'm going to do first. Okay, so 2 o'clock, and this is for 30 minutes. Now he went for 42 minutes, so I need to still add 12 more minutes. So I'm going to do another 10, which brings me to 2:10. And then I'm going to do 2, which brings me to 2:12. So I have 30 plus 10 plus 2. So 30, 40, and 42 brings me to 2:12 p.m. So the time ends at 2:12 p.m. So Javier finishes working on his project at 2:12 p.m. Another way to find it is to use that analog clock. And so you find the starting time on the clock, which they've done for us. It's 1:30. We start there, and then we're going to jump around by 5s, and we're going to fill in the blanks as we go. Okay? And when we get here, it's by 1s. So it goes 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, and then it goes 41, and then 42. All right, and so we still end up with 42 here, and then we have to figure out what time the clock says now that all that time has passed. Well, now that clock is going to say 2:12 p.m. So here we need to write 2:12 p.m. So 2:12 p.m. All right, find starting times. Whitney went swimming in the ocean for 25 minutes. She finished swimming at 11:15 a.m. At what time did Whitney start swimming? One way is you can use a number line to find the starting time. Step 1 is to find the time on the number line when Whitney finished, which they have already labeled for us at 11:15 a.m. Then step 2 is to count back on the number line to subtract the elapsed time, draw and label the jumps to show the minutes. So we have to jump back 25 minutes. So if you go back by 15, that brings you to 11, because 11:15 and then 11. And then if you go back again by 10, that brings you to 10:50, and 15 and 10 together are 25, so you know you went back 25 minutes, and so 10:50 is the time that she started. So you jumped back to 10:50, and that's a.m. So Whitney started swimming at 10:50 a.m. Another way is you can use a clock to find the starting time. So step 1 is to find the ending time on the clock, which they already did, which is 11:15. And then step 2 is to count back by 5s for the elapsed time of 25 minutes and write the missing counting numbers next to the clock. So they start you off and they go 5, this will be 10, 15, 20, and 25. All right, and so if you bring your minute hand all the way back, you're going to cross over the 12, which makes it 10 o'clock now, and then you're going to bring your minute hand all the way to the 10 here, which makes it 10:50. So the starting time is 10:50 a.m. All right, and then for the share and show, use the number line to find the starting time if the elapsed time is 35 minutes. They give us the starting time on the number line, and we have to go backwards 35 minutes. So I'm going to go back by 10. So since I have to do 35, I'm going to go 10, 20, 30. So I'll know that those are all 10s. And if I go backwards, this would be 5 o'clock. This would be 4:50. This would be 4:40. And then if you go back by 5, because it'd be 10, 20, 35, which makes your 35 minutes, then it's going to be 4:35. So our time is 4:35 p.m. Continuing on, it says find the ending time. Starting time is 1:40 and the elapsed time is 33 minutes. So since it's the starting time, we start over here on the left. So we need to put 1:40 and then we need to go 33 minutes. So let's go by 10. So we've got 10, which brings us to 1:50, another 10, which will bring us to 2 o'clock, and one last 10, which will bring us to 2:10, and then we'll just do a jump for 3 minutes because it's 33, and that brings us to 2:13. So the elapsed time, or the total, the ending time, is 2:13 p.m. If our analog clock, the time starts at 9:55, which they have done for us on the clock, and our elapsed time is 27 minutes, we have to figure out what the time is now. So the starting time is 9:55, so we're just going to go around the clock like we regularly would. So this would be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and then we have to go 26, and then 27. So it's a second line after the 4. So if we were to pretend that this clock moved, it would now be at 11, and the minute hand would be at 27. So it would be 11, or not 27, I'm sorry, 22. So it'd be at 11:22 a.m. because it's 5, 10, 15, 20, 21, 22. All right, the next part on your own, I want you to try numbers 4 and number 5, and then pause the video and then come back and I'll go over them with you. All right, on your own, number 4, if you had the ending time at 3:05, and since it was ending, you had to start on the right-hand side of your number line, and no matter which way what numbers you used up here to count, as long as you made it back to 2:25, then you did it correctly, because you had to go back by 40 minutes. So 2:25 p.m. is your final answer. And then on the analog clock, it was also an ending time, so they gave you 8:06, and since you were ending, your ending time, you had to figure out what you started, you had to go the opposite way. So I just went back 1 and then by 5s, and this minute hand would land on the 10, and your hour would change, so it would be 7:50 a.m. All right, problem solving applications. It says Susie began fishing at 10:30 a.m. and fished until 11:10 a.m. James finished fishing at 11:45 a.m., so he fished for the same length of time as Susie. At what time did James start fishing? All right, so to find the elapsed time, you have to first begin with figuring out how much time is that Susie actually fished. So you can use an analog clock, you can use a number line, you can count in your head, whatever it takes for you to figure that out. I'm just gonna pretend and use this analog clock up here. So 10:30, my minute hand would be at the 6, and then I have to get all the way to 11:10. So my minute hand is gonna move around the clock until I get to the 2 to be 11:10. So from 6 to the 2, if I counted, it'd be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 minutes. So 40 minutes we need to keep in mind. So I'm just gonna write 40 minutes here so I don't forget. Okay, 40 minutes is the time that Susie actually was fishing. And since James finished fishing at 11:45 a.m., he fished for the same length of time as Susie. So that means we have to go from 11:45 and we have to add 40 minutes on. So we can use this analog clock again. So if we're at 45 and we just want to add 40 minutes on, now mind you, it's 11:45 that he finished. We have to figure out, we have to go backwards. So we want to go backwards by 40 minutes. It'd be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 brings us to the 1. So instead of it being 11:45, it would only be 11:05. So we're just going to say James started at 11:05 a.m. All right, number 7 says Jessica starts cleaning her room at 5:50 p.m. and finishes at 6:44 p.m. Her sister Nora finishes cleaning her room at 7:12 p.m. She cleans for the same amount of time as Jessica. At what time does Nora start cleaning? So we have to figure out the elapsed time that Jessica cleaned so that we know what time Nora started, okay? So we have to go from 5:50 to 6:44 and figure out how much time is in between those. So I just made like 2 pretend clocks over here, and I just made a circle and then a line at the top and bottom and side to side about halfway, and those represent 12, 3, 6, and 9 on the clock. And I did that twice because we're gonna need 2 clocks, okay? The first time is at 5:50, and if I think 50 on a clock, that's at the 10. So I'm just gonna put a 10 here, and you can make little marks for the other hours that would be on the clock if that's helpful for you. Or you can just look back up at another clock too. But from 5:50 until 6:44. So we have to go, you can either start at 6:44, which would be here, or you can start at 5:50, it doesn't matter, but either way you just have to count. Okay, so I'm gonna go from 50 to 44. So it goes 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. And then in between each of these there's 4 lines, and we gotta stop at 44, so it would be 4 more places. So it's 50 plus 4, which makes 54 minutes in between. Okay, so 54 minutes. And then we have to figure out, since Nora finishes cleaning her room at 7:12, so, and it wants to know what time did she start. So on our other clock, if we put in these other notches for the other hours as well, that will be helpful. And 7:12, it would be 5, 10, 11, and 12. And we want to go backwards this time to see what time she started. So since we're going to cross over the 12-minute mark, that means our hour has changed. So we know it's going to be 6 something, okay? So if we go here just to this, where would the 2 would be, that would only be 2. And then if we count by 5s, we need to do 54. So it'd be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, and 50. And then plus our 2, that's 52. And then 53 and 54. And if we had 4 lines in here, now our minute hand would be over here and would be right on that spot where I marked. And if we were really carefully looking at the clock, that would show me that it's at 18 minutes because it goes 5, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18. So 6:18. So 6:18 p.m. is the time that Nora started cleaning. Number 8 says Dante's surfing lesson began at 2:35. His lesson lasted 45 minutes. Draw hands on the clock to show the time Dante's surfing lesson ended. So 2:35, I know 35 is going to be at the 7. And we want to know what time his lesson ended, so we're going to go around the clock the regular way. And it lasted for 45 minutes. So we just need to go around 45. Okay, so we're going to go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45 brings us to the 4. So our minute hand is at the 4. And then since it started at 2:35 and we went around and we passed the 12, that now means that it's 3 o'clock. So it's a little bit after the 3, really. And you want to make sure that this hand looks a little bit shorter than this hand. Okay? So it should be 3:20 on the clock. Okay, 3:20. All right, connect to science. Tides. If you have ever been to a beach, you have seen the water rise and fall along the shore every day. This change in water level is called the tide. Ocean tides are mostly caused by the pull of the moon and the sun's gravity. High tide is when the water is at its highest level, and low tide is when the water is at its lowest level. In most places on Earth, high tide and low tide each occur about twice a day. So use the table on the right for 9 and 10. So we have, for number 9, the first morning Courtney walked on the beach for 20 minutes. She finished her walk 30 minutes before high tide. What time did Courtney walk? So when we look over here, we have tide times for Atlantic City, New Jersey. We have the low tide and we have the high tide. So since this says the first morning, we're gonna look at day 1 in the morning, which is AM. So high tide is at 9 AM, and since she walked for 20 minutes and it lets us know that she finished her walk 30 minutes before, we need to add 20 plus 30 together, and 20 plus 30 equals 50. So then we have to figure out 50 minutes before 9 AM. And if we were to count backwards on a clock, if we were at 9 AM and we went backwards 50, we'd go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, and that would bring us to the 2. And we know that's 10 minutes after the hour. So since it's before 9 and it's 50 minutes before, it's now 8:10 AM. 8:10 AM. All right, number 10, use reasoning. The third afternoon, Courtney started collecting shells at low tide. She collected shells for 35 minutes. At what time did Courtney finish collecting shells? So since it says the third afternoon, we have to look at day 3. And since it said it was happening in the afternoon, we need to look at the PM. So at day 3 in the PM, the high, does it say high tide? Let's double check. Oh, it says low tide. So at day 3 for low tide in the PM, it's 4:30 PM. And it says she collected shells for 35 minutes. So at what time did she finish collecting shells? So we have to pretend that our minute hand is at the 30, and we have to go for 35 more minutes. So we're gonna go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. That brings us to the 1, which is 5, okay? So since we went further, we added on to the next hour, which makes it 5, and since we landed on the 1 on the clock, that's 05. So it's 5. So at what time did Courtney finish collecting shells? It was 5:05 PM. 5:05 PM. Okay, everybody, so for today, you are going to go ahead for your assignment and you're going to go to Think Central. You'll have a practice lesson and then the regular assignment for lesson 3. Complete both of those on Think Central and then go back to Google Classroom and mark is done and you are finished after that. Okay, have a great day. Bye.